Okay, everyone, this is the ICU lab. This is the image of the surprised woman that we got from Pixabay. Let's pretend this is your portrait. In this lab, we're going to retouch this image using some of Photoshop's healing tools and color correction functions, using some of the stuff that we were learning about adjustment layers. Then we're going to distort certain aspects of it to make it into a creepy Halloween-style image graphic. So, this is the first step. Let's use the crop tool, first of all, to make this image 8 by 10. So I'm going to the crop tool, right? I'm clicking on W times H times resolution, which is width times height times resolution. I'm going to go ahead and put in 8 in, and it figures out that I mean inches by that, by 10. So it's an 8 by 10 image. So this is how I want you to crop this, and I want you to follow these steps of this lab and then turn in the finished product by following along what I'm doing here. Okay, so we've got 8 by 10 inches. We're going to go 300 pixels because we're intending to print this someday. We can use the crop marquee tool to kind of like position the image how we want it to be within the crop. And then we're going to either check the box up here or just hit enter. I like checking the box for some reason. And it did some weird view, but if we do Command 0 again, now it's cropped. If we go up to image size, we can see that it is in fact 8 by 10. Yeah? So we succeeded in our cropping. All right, go for us. Good for us. Or as Mr. White says, yay for us. Okay, so first we're gonna try to, we're gonna polish up this image just a little bit, just to get some practice with our healing tools. So, when moving forward in this class, we're gonna try to be working non-destructively. So that means we're going to try to make edits that we can always undo if we want to, or modify so that we're not stuck with an effect that we thought looked cool for a while and then decided as we continued working that it didn't look good after all, which happens all the time with this stuff. So you have to kind of go into this process with the attitude of working non-destructively. So that's what we're going to do here. So the way that we're working non-destructively here is we're actually going to make a new layer down in the layers panel, right? And we're going to call this healing tools. So healing tools. So we're going to use some of the tools here to, let's say, correct this image, but we're doing it in such a way that we can back out of it or change it later if we want to. And that's called working non-destructively. All right. So the first thing I want to do is there's this weird bobby pin up here, right? If you can see it. Actually, I should zoom the other way with Photoshop so you can still see the tools. This weird bobby pin, right? And if you look closely at it, it's kind of distracting. So let's get rid of it. In this case, we're going to use the remove tool. Okay, whenever I see these circles, that means that this tool uses the brush, and with the brush, the left bracket makes it smaller and the right bracket makes it longer. So when we're doing fine tuning like this, we want to make it a smaller tool. Okay, so I'm just going to click here and I'm going to, let's see here. What I forgot to do is to click on sample all layers, I believe. So if I click on that guy, I think that this will work now. So here we go. And we gotta wait. So while we're waiting, I had to click on sample all layers because I created a layer, but it was just an empty layer. I need to click on sample all layers so that I'm going through this sort of healing layer onto the actual image. Okay, and let's get rid of this thing too because I think it's another one, and it works pretty well. The remove tool, right? It's a relatively new Photoshop tool, and it's AI smart, so it can figure out what stuff is and take it out. The other thing we can do while we're here is like these little let's see, we can also take out this little bit of mascara. This is, we don't want to go too far with this kind of stuff because we are not trying to be godlike in making her look how we want her to look. Okay, so let's zoom back out. We're done with that. And I'm going to zoom. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to do some color and tone adjustment, okay? So right now, if you look at the image, it's a little bit washed out. It's not terrible, but it's a little bit like it lacks contrast. And one of the ways we can tell this is if we right click and this allows us to set the Photoshop background to a different color. So I'm going to switch it to black. And if you notice now it's black back here, comparing it to like say her hair in the image, which is like the darkest aspect, it still never gets black. And you usually want at least some small parts of an image to have a real full black. So I find this view distracting, so I'm going to right click here. I'm going to go back to the default. But now I know that I want to adjust the contrast a little bit, okay? So I am going to, let's, while we're here, let's label our layers. So we're gonna call her model, right? And then we've got our healing tools layer. We're gonna make a new layer, let's see, between there. And actually, sorry, we want to make an adjustment layer. So we're learning how to do this now. It's way down here, this little guy. It's a new adjustment layer, okay? And what we want to do is a brightness and contrast adjustment layer. So I click on that guy. Okay, so now you can see in the properties panel, we have brightness and contrast, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the contrast. Before I do that, I want you to notice that the brightness, the adjustment layer down here in the layers panel came with what's called a layer mask. So that means this thumbnail represents the image and the part of the image that we're applying our effect to. So it's in the world of layer masks, white reveals and black conceals. You should remember that. So what this means is that because this is all white, everything in the image is going to be adjusted, is going to be affected by the changes that I make here. And that's okay for now. But in other situations, we're going to create more specific layer masks so we can say like change the color of her eyes and stuff like that. Okay, so I'm going to back out again here. I'm going to like, see, let's slide. I'm going to adjust the contrast really hard so you can see what it looks like when you really drag it out. Now, the problem with this is that the white areas are kind of blowing out now, okay? Normally, we would make adjustments that are, you know, a lot more subtle, but let's go dramatic for this one, right? Let's turn the contrast up and the brightness down. And that gives us kind of like a more dramatic looking image. So if you look down here in the layers panel, I can click on the eyeball to see what it looks like without it. See, it looks pretty washed out compared to the corrected version that I did. And so we'll go with that for now, okay? The next thing I want to do is to change the color of her shirt. Okay, actually, you know what? The brightness needs to go up just a little bit here. So we're going to change the color of her shirt. What we're going to do is we're going to add another adjustment layer. Okay, down here. And this one is going to be hue saturation. So that's one of the main ways to change and affect the color. I'm going to come back out. And so what I'm going to do here is this is the, what's it called? I think it's called the targeted adjustment tool, but it looks like a little hand. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to click on this guy and we're going to tell Photoshop that we want to change the color of her shirt. So when I move that icon over, it turns into an eyedropper and it says to Photoshop, this is, you know, this is the color that I actually want to change. So I'm going to back out. It now knows that's what I'm going to change. So now I'm going to drag the hue slider in the properties panel, right, toward kind of like the greens right there. Okay, see, I just changed the color of her shirt. It's magic, right? I didn't even have to make a selection. And then I'm going to, let's see here, I'm going to dial back the saturation just a little bit to keep it sort of subtle. And then I'm going to name both of these. Let's see. I'm going to name this this layer, I'm going to rename this layer, sorry, turn blue shirt green. Because when you label your layers like this, you forget what you did a while ago, and this really helps you, look at it to see what is what. Increased contrast. So that's what we did just before this. Okay, so there. Now we've done the basic correction type things with this image. The next thing I'm gonna do is I am going to use the clone stamp tool what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the eyeballs on her hands. Okay, so first of all, I want to click on the clone stamp tool, which is here. Okay, I'm going to zoom in. I'm using the space bar to pan up in the image, right? I can, once again, I have different brush sizes here, so I can clone like a different area, a different sized area if I want. Up here I have hardness and size for my brushes, and this will be relevant to like how it ends up looking. Okay, so I'm gonna get out of that menu. We want to make sure once again that we, I'm sorry. We want to make a layer for this. Okay, so we don't want to destructively put the eyeballs on our hand. We want to make it a layer that can be turned on and off. So I'm just going to say create new layer in the bottom right, and I'm going to call this eyeballs on hands. Okay, so I have the clone stamp tool selected still. I want to make sure that up here that I am on sample all layers, because since I made a non-destructive layer, I need to be able to access the original image, or else it's not going to have anything to clone stamp. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. Actually, I get confused when I'm zooming. So we are going to make sure it's set to sample all layers. And we're going to sample her eyeball, right? So when I do this, I hold down the Option key, right? And the Option key tells the clone stamp tool that this is what I want to sample, okay? Now it has sampled the eyeball, and you can see here that there it is, right? One thing we can do is we can go to the window clone source. That brings up a separate little panel here. And also we're going to go back to the brushes and let's see, hardness. Okay, so we're going to dial down the hardness a little bit. Okay, so we get some softer edges. I'm going to sample her eyeball there. I'm going to kind of paint it on her hand, right? And then I'm actually going to change the angle here. Let's see. So this is the clone source panel, which you can find in the window menu. And I'm trying to figure out how to actually change it. Let's see. I think what we wanted to do is something like -20. It didn't work. There we go. I think you have to put in the -20 beforehand. So there's an eyeball there, right? And then we'll just go for the other side. We'll go +20. Okay. And we're going to sample this eye for that, and we're going to kind of paint it in here. Okay. There we go. So now we got our eyes on our hands, right? So we zoom back out. Ah, it's horrifying. What's going on? Okay, so the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna like hyperextend her fingers so that it looks like she's undergoing some ghoulish transformation. Actually, I'm gonna reset to essentials. Okay, so for this we're gonna use a filter. Okay. And the filters are, by their nature, destructive, and so we want to we have to take an extra step to make sure that we don't get stuck in using a destructive filter that we can't take off later. And the way that we do this is we go back to the model layer, and we click on the layer, not the thumbnail, because that'll bring up a different menu, but the layer itself, and we want to choose convert to smart object. And this is it's a relatively new function of Photoshop that allows you to kind of take aspects of the image and make it so that you can always reverse any changes that you make. So we're going to make that a smart object, and you can tell it's a smart object because it has this little icon down here in the lower right. Okay, zooming back out. So now I'm going to choose, let's see here. We're going to use the liquefy filter. So we're going to go up to filters, and we're going to go liquefy, distort. Can't remember where it's located. There it is. It's up here in its own separate category. Okay, liquefy. Liquefy is it's a filter that that you can do a lot of different kinds of things with, and so it brings up its own menu and window entirely here. So we're wanting to just kind of use this on our fingers. So what we're going to use here is the forward warp tool, top left. Okay, we're going to click on that. Sorry. And then let's see, if I drag it across her face, you can kind of tell what it does when it's just not subtle, you know? So I'm going to undo all that. Command Z. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on her hands, right? Let's see. And one of these tools is called the freeze tool. So this is the freeze. It freezes the mask at a certain point. Once again, you can see we have brushes. So I'm going to make that brush a little smaller. And what I do is I kind of draw a line across her fingers so that when we do this distortion, it doesn't go too far. We're just going to get more like the fingertips. I hope that's how it actually works out. Okay. So now I'm going to do, once again, the forward warp. Okay. Forward warp tool. And I'm going to make my brush smaller so it's about the size of her fingers. And I'm just going to kind of pull them out like that, right? And then that looks a little too pointy. So, and now because we have the freeze filter on the knuckles, it's not pulling the whole hand out. So I'm kind of just extending her fingers like this, and then that looks weird. You got to make sure it doesn't totally look unnatural, right? You want to keep some of the roundness of the fingers. Okay, and then so it's kind of like you're repainting this photo. It's pretty interesting. I'm moving over here to her other hand. There's some weird lines in there that don't look good. It looks like digitally altered, but when we zoom back out, you'll be surprised. So I'm just doing my best, That's all we can do is our best. Let's see if we can make that a little more round. And a little more pointy at the top here. Let's drag this finger out. You'll probably be better at this than me. So we'll drag that out. I can't get this middle finger right. Anyway, we'll leave it there for now. I'm going to click OK. And there it is. Her fingers are all weird and elongated. Okay. Now, if we look down at the layers panel here, we have our smart object. And normally, if you did not make the layer into a smart object, it wouldn't have any of this stuff. It would just be kind of destructively applied. You would not be able to fix it later. In this case, we can see if I hit the eyeball, we can turn it on and off. If you're looking at her fingers, it's back to normal, and then with the effect. And then we can also, if we double click on liquefy, we can bring that whole panel menu back up, and we can change everything about the liquefying that we did. I'm not going to do that now, but that's a relatively new function. You used to be kind of stuck with whatever you did, and you'd have to like save it as a different version to fix it. Okay. Let's see here. I think the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna turn her eyes like a blood red. So the first thing we'll do with that is we're gonna zoom into her eyeball. We're gonna make an elliptical marquee selection. Okay. What I'm gonna do here is go pretty far in, and then I'm gonna try to just like make it the right size, and then if I hold down spacebar, I can move the selection. I'm holding down spacebar right now, and I know that's getting part of her eyelid, but I'm gonna like be okay with that for now, and I'm gonna fix it in a minute. So now we're gonna make sure that we're gonna keep selecting these eyeballs. So I'm gonna go to make sure that I'm adding to the selection instead of just replacing it, and that's here. Okay, so add to selection. Now I'm gonna go over to her other eyeball, right? Kind of just dragged from the corner on that one. So you can see we have two of these guys now. I think I can do all these at the same time. So once again, and it's a little too big. I actually find doing this kind of work to be oddly meditative. You know, you're just kind of like trying to make your selections good. It's like drawing almost, but not as cool. So now I have them all selected. Okay. I think maybe I'll just do one of these for the sake of time, but I'm going to ask you, you should pause the video at any time to do what I did, right? I'm going to fix one of these eyes so that we don't have this intersecting area of the eyelid. So I'm going to use the magnetic lasso to kind of really get in there and make sure we're not getting the eyelid. And what I do is subtract from selection. Okay, this one. And then I'm gonna kind of like go pretty slow. Actually, I don't think that's good. There we go, like this kind of, right? So we're getting along. And then when we're outside of the other selection area, we can kind of just like randomly go around. And when this selection is complete, it takes that part out. All right, so that's pretty good. I'm gonna do the same thing over here. Right? When you see the O, it's complete. That's much better now. And then do the same for these guys. This is actually going pretty fast, so I'll just do it all. Let's see. Okay. I'm kind of proud of myself for doing these selections without messing up a bunch. Okay, so now we have our selections. I'm going to zoom back out. Maybe not that far out. Okay, so now I'm going to make them turn blood red. Okay, so I am going to make another adjustment layer here. Sometimes I get confused about. Okay, new adjustment layer. And this one we're going to do solid color. Okay, we're gonna choose red. We're gonna go all the way to the extremist red, right? And then we're gonna hit OK. Okay, that's weird because we had those other ones in the selection, but I'm not gonna worry about it right now. Obviously, this looks kind of dumb, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna fix it up. Okay, so I just want you to notice now. First of all, I want to get, okay, so I want to make sure that I get all the eyeballs. Because those are all selected. All the color. Right? And then it's still only changing those. Okay, everybody, I figured out what was wrong before when I was only getting the eyeballs. I'm trying to turn her eyeballs blood red, and I got confused because, oops, sorry. I was in Photoshop and I was making this filter, this adjustment layer, and it's a solid color, right? And I made it red, but it was only her actual eyeballs and not her hand eyeballs. How could we do such a thing? So I'm undoing that, and then what I realized is that the eyeballs on the hand are on this layer up top, so I need to make my adjustment layer above that, or else it will only apply to adjustment layers only apply to things that are below them in the layer stack. So that's the important thing to remember. So now if I make an adjustment layer, I'm gonna go solid color. I'm gonna change it to red. We're gonna drag it to the extreme red, right? And then I just want you to see with these selections now, we have now what's called a layer mask. So if you look at this little thumbnail here, you can see the little white spots, the black conceals and white reveals, right? So the only things that are getting affected in our adjustment layer here are the eyeballs that we made part of the mask by making selections before we made the adjustment layer. Okay. So if you hold down Option and you click on the thumbnail, you can see the layer mask in the main screen here. And so that shows us that these white circles are the only thing that is getting affected by our adjustment layer. So good to know, because we're going to move forward in using layer masks in a more sophisticated way soon. Okay, so we don't want this to be like this, right? Solid red. It looks weird. It just looks like a paint program or something. So we're going to do... we are going to change the blend mode. Now, blend mode is not something that we've really talked about so far, but it's usually here, right? Each layer has its own blending mode. We're gonna, the class that I took did a whole long lesson on blend modes, and they're worth it. But for now, we're just gonna choose color, because that is the type of blend mode that's used for color replacement a lot of the time. Let's see. So yeah, so there it is, and that looks it looks better, right? It still looks a little bit strange. I wonder, like, okay, you know what I think maybe it is oh crap. I'm canceling out that. It happens, right? So here we have the properties of the layer mask, right? If I click on this thumbnail where it says color fill, and I think if I feather the effect here, do you see that? Feathering kind of turns down the hardness of the, if you go too far, it's gone, but it turns down like the hardness of the edges of the effects in the layer mask. And so I think that's just one way that I can make it kind of not as crazy, okay? And so that looks a little bit more kind of realistic. Okay, so the last major thing that we're going to do here is we're going to create a vignette, which is a kind of circular selection around her, where we're going to make the outside of the selection darker, and stays the same brightness in the middle. You'll see in a minute, okay? So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to make an elliptical marquee selection, right? I'm going to do this. So basically, like, she's going to be framed in this circle type, oval type thing, and I'm having a little trouble making it. There we go. And what I want it to look like is that it's darker at the corners and the edges than it is when we're inside this circle. So to do that, you might think, oh, I could make like a adjustment layer, a brightness and adjustment layer just right here. And so if I did that, you can see that it does automatically create a layer mask here. But when I change things here, it's happening inside the circle, and I really want it to be outside of the circle. So I'm going to take away that adjustment layer. And when I make my selection, I'm going to show you kind of a new trick, or maybe you've discovered it already. Here, that's a better selection anyways. And so I really don't want what's inside of this oval, sorry, to be affected. I want the outside. So what I do is I go up to select, and I go let's see, inverse. So that what that does is pretty much like the opposite of the current selection. So it sort of looks like it's still the oval around here, but if you look at the marching ants around the sides, what it really means is that just the corners are actually now selected. So if I make a adjustment layer now for brightness and contrast, okay, and then I'm going to turn the brightness down. See, now I'm actually affecting the outside of the elliptical marquee that I made. So I'm going to turn it down like that. The other thing that I want to do is I don't want it to be so hard, the edges there. I want to what's called feather the vignette, the selection. So if you look over here on our properties panel, when we're doing an adjustment layer, when this left-hand sun guy is selected, we're basically changing the aspects of the adjustment layer. But when we click on this guy, we're changing the aspects of the mask, okay? So if I go ahead and feather this mask, it takes a while to see, like to preview it. So that's with kind of a lot of feathering, right? So this is very hard, not feathered. This is, it's pretty soft, right? We're getting softer and softer, and somewhere around there, it's like, it's nice to have the line disappear, and then this is what it looks like, right? So maybe a little bit less, or a little bit more actually, so that, you know, we can see the lighting in the circle is drawing her out as the foreground of the image, but the circle of the layer mask is not so hard that it looks, you know, fake. Okay, so the last step in this lab is you're going to go File, Save As, and I would like you to name your file your last name, and then an underscore, and then the first letter of your the first name, and then an underscore, and this is called the ICU lab. So you're going to make that, and you can save it that way, right? And then that's what you turn in. I'm not going to do it because I've done this a bunch of times. It's just going to make another file. While we're here, if we want to take a look at another way to get a file out of this, we can go to Export, Export As, right? And in this way, we can create a JPEG that is going to be a smaller file, so it's easier to deal with when we're dealing with a whole bunch of stuff. We can dial in the quality. The lower the quality, the smaller the file will be. And you can make a JPEG that way, because PSDs are not going to be readable to people that don't have Photoshop, and they're not going to work for a lot of just simple web things where you need a JPEG to just put into your website right away. Okay, so this is the way you would get a JPEG out of that, and then we would click Export. I'm not going to do it once again because I already have quite a few of these copies of these files, but that's how you would get a JPEG. And so that's it. This is the end of the ICU lab.